You're probably looking for LLQP exam tips or study tips like I was about a month ago when I started studying for my LLQP course. I found all of the people's posts and different things I found online to be really helpful. And so I thought I'd pay it forward and try to share with you some of the things that I found helpful and some of the things that I wish I knew before I started writing. I hope it's helpful to you. A little about me. I wrote in BC, and I don't come from a financial insurance background, so learning this stuff was all new to me, aside from just what I do in my own life. I didn't, to be blunt, I didn't think that it would be as hard as it was. I went to university, finished degrees, and I'm a reader. I naturally am interested in this stuff, so I kind of thought, how hard could it really be? And I wrote the ethics professional practice module first. I did some practice exams, and after gleaning through the textbook and going, yeah, that's obvious, that's obvious, that's obvious, I wrote the test and did really poorly on it. Thankfully, it kind of shocked me to give respect to this material. And as I started studying and respecting it and respecting the exams that were coming, I did find that it was work. But it wasn't so hard that it was not doable. I wrote my LQP about a week ago. I did it all in one day, 6 hours of my life that I'll never get back, and thankfully I'll never have to do again because I passed. So for what it's worth, here's some things that were helpful to me. The test itself is structured as 35 questions, with exception to ethics professional practice. That's 5 questions less. It's 35 questions with 5 pilot questions. So only 30 questions count. The 5 pilot questions are sample questions that they're planning to use for future tests, and they don't count for your exam, but you don't know which ones those are. So at 35 questions, 75 minutes per module, it works out to roughly 2 minutes per question. So one of the things that I always do is I don't want to be looking at the clock wondering if I'm too long or too short. I don't want to be rushing at the end. And so what I do is I figure out what the average is. So 2 minutes per question. And then at 10 questions, I block off 20 minutes. At question 20, it would be 40 minutes and so on. And so I just look at the clock, say it starts at 10 o'clock. I know it's at question 10, it should be 10:20. I'll know at question 20, it should be 10:40. And I'll know at question 30, it should be 11 o'clock. And I'll just mark down the time at question 10, question 20, question 30. Well, then when I get to 10, that question, I just look at the clock and go, okay, I'm ahead of time by 5 minutes or I'm behind by 5 minutes. And then I know I can speed up or slow down accordingly. It also gives me a bit of a mental break every 10 minutes or every 10 questions. And I'm not sure about you, but sometimes when I do multiple choice questions, when I get to one I don't know and I'm going to come back to it, I just kind of put a dot on my exam book. You can write on your books, by the way. But on my bubble sheet, I might forget to mark it down. So marking down those times with and blocking the sections also gives me that ability that if I forgot to adjust my bubble sheet, instead of having to get to the end of the test realizing that I didn't erase question 9 and having to erase all of them up to question 9, I only have to erase a couple if I've made a mistake there. So that was helpful for me, just to kind of section those things off. Your test is open book, so you'll get a tablet that has, I wrote in person, that will have a copy of your the old textbook and the new one that's just come out. And then you can there's a search bar, you can find the terms and so on and write that way. I spent a lot of time committing to memory things I didn't need to. If I'd known that it was open book early, I would have just memorized where those charts and things were within the book itself. So for example, like what's the percentage for OAS that gets clawed back, or at what point do you what are the percentages that go with our riffs and stuff like that. So just memorize that they're in the book, memorize where they are in the book, and when it comes time to that question, instead of trying to recall that, you're now just recalling where you find it in the textbook. You can't do that all the way through or you'll run out of time, but you can do it for a few things, and I would have just committed way less to memory. There's not as many calculations as you might fear there would be. I don't get really bent out of shape about calculations because I like math and stuff, but I did spend a lot of time working out like ACB numbers and seg fund cash outs, annuity calculations, and I kind of did way more than I should have. I was prepared for super hard calculations and really complicated situations, and the calculations that I had to do were actually quite simple. It was like, so and so needs to make $40,000 a year, and how much do they need to have in their nest egg in order for that to happen, or how much disability insurance would this person need if they were to get injured. And those things just weren't that complicated. And when they came up, even if they were harder than I was expecting them to be, you can kind of narrow down a couple of them, and so it ends up kind of being 50-50. So I wouldn't have worried as much about that. I didn't study hardly anything on group insurance, and I really should have. Not that there were a lot, but more than I expected there to be. When you're writing your test, every question comes as a paragraph. And I don't know that I was prepared for how many words, just plain words, I'd have to read throughout the day. But much like a know your client would be in real life, each question gives you a whole ton of detail, a lot of which you really don't need to know. So it'll say like Jim and Joan are married. They have 2 kids and 4 grandkids, and they want to go to Mexico every year, and they live in a house. This much, how much they owe. This is what they like to do when they're on their holidays. And really, the question is just how much accident sickness insurance do they need. So what will keep you from question fatigue is read the question first. So before you read the paragraph, go to the question, read the question, and the question might say, Jim and Joan are purchasing accident insurance. What accident sickness insurance would you recommend? And then read the answers and cross out the ones that are obviously wrong. So it might say, Jim and Joe need accident sickness insurance for $10 million. And you know, no way. Of course they're not going to need that much. And so you can just cross that one out. Cross out the ones that are obviously wrong. You might be able, if you can eliminate 1 or 2, now instead of a 25% chance, you're down to 33 or down to 50 or whatever. And then go back and read the question. And when you read the question, you can then circle the keywords that are important. You know, it's an accident sickness question, so circle the things that have to do with accident and sickness. You can ignore the things that have to do with succession planning and all of those other things, because you know what the question is asking. You can mark up your test book. So by circling those questions, even if you don't know the answer, you can put an X there or something to. So you circle back to it, and when you come back to that question, you'll know what are the important words. That will keep you from getting so tired through that 6 hours of your LQP day, and keep you from having to read just a myriad of details that you really don't care about. Inevitably, you will come to questions that you don't know the answer to. They always ask something that's somewhere that will be obscure. Your eyes will come to a page in your textbook with a big chart, and the question has to do with a footnote that's at the bottom. And it's really annoying. Like, I just always got frustrated when that happened. But when the test comes and you know, I remember reading this, I have no idea where to find it. I didn't memorize where it is in the textbook. When I put it in the search bar, it doesn't give me anything helpful. I'm just going to come back to it later. My brain has a hard time disconnecting from that. And I think about that question, or maybe I want to remember it, so when I am finished the test, I can look back at my textbook and figure out what the answer was. Something that was really helpful for me was to think of it as lily pads. So question 1 is a lily pad. When I'm done question 1, whether it's answering it or it's skipping it, I need to move to question 2, and I need to leave that lily pad and go to another one. And when you're done each question, you need to be able to train your brain to move on to other questions without going back and holding the question in your mind. Because what will happen in your through the hour and 15 minutes, but even more than that through the day, is you're just going to have so much extra information in your brain that you will miss details. So think of it as lily pads. Train yourself to think of each question individually, and when you guess or when you don't know, just leave it behind and move on. That was good for me. Don't, as I said at the beginning, don't underestimate parts of the test. Ethics professional practice is 5 questions less. So you have a little bit more time, but each question is worth a bit more, right? Because there's, instead of being graded out of 30, it's being only graded out of 25. A few kind of peculiar things about the test itself. I'm studying for the CSC at the same time, and in my CSC, the concept of leveraging is generally not seen as a good thing. But in the LLQP, it's okay in situations when when the paragraph says the investor is an aggressive investor. If that's the case, the LLQP has no problems with leveraging. So don't worry about it. Definitely don't eliminate that answer because leveraging is a part of it, unless they're a conservative investor, in which case obviously they're not going to want to borrow to invest. But just don't see leveraging as a bad thing. Another thing that was really important in studying for the test was the role of segregated funds and life insurance in particular around estate planning. Obviously, that's a big reason why people will buy these products, but they want to know, you got to be really clear in your mind, like, why would someone buy a segregated fund versus a mutual fund? What advantages does that have in estate planning? Or permanent insurance versus term insurance, or those kinds of things, and how does it affect creditors? How does it affect passing things on to beneficiaries? Who owns the policies? Those kinds of things are important. So make sure you don't gloss over that. Like, you have to have a pretty good understanding of how those things function in relation to one another. Another thing that was helpful for me was not overstudying the day before or during. Having a clear brain is going to be more important to you than cramming that last little bit of information in. So the night before, I didn't study. I just kind of watched Netflix and whatever. And then the day of, I brought notes with me, expecting that I would read them before my test and between the tests. And I was just so fried after each test that I just wanted to get a cup of coffee. So I just went and got coffee and chatted, and that was way better for me than trying to put in another piece of information into my brain. And also just lots of practice. If you can find practice tests online or through whatever school you're studying this through, that's going to be invaluable in terms of training you to do the lily pads, or train you to read the paragraphs and figure out what's important, or train yourself to read the question first. All of that stuff, all of that practice is going to be invaluable. So don't skimp on that time. Anyway, please leave your comments. I'd love to know how you did. And I wish you well, wish your career well, and I hope something that I'm sharing with you benefits you in the future. Best of luck.